We live in a cosmos that is divided into regions of consciousness. At each level, there's a population that is adapted to the conditions there. That means we on this planet are not the only intelligent beings in the cosmos. We're being given every opportunity to understand our nature as beings of pure consciousness, part of the supreme conscious being, just like sparks are part of the fire. We don't evolve up from matter, we devolve or come down from spirit.
Hello everyone and welcome to Atma Podcast. Today we have a truly special guest with us. It's Michael Cremo, an author, independent researcher, alternative archaeologist, international speaker and PhD in Vaishnava theology, a member of the World Archaeological Congress and the European Association of Archaeologists. He is affiliated with the Bhaktivedanta Institute, where he works in the field of the history and philosophy of science. He has also appeared several times on the History Channel in the series Ancient Aliens, but is definitely best known for his groundbreaking books Forbidden Archaeology, The Hidden History of the Human Race, and Human Devolution, a Vedic alternative to Darwin's theory. This interview is a natural continuation of our first conversation about a year ago, where we discussed his best-selling book Forbidden Archaeology, co-authored with Richard Thompson. In this episode, we will focus on his remarkable and revolutionary book, Human Devolution, in which he presents a clear alternative to Darwin's theory of evolution. I would also like to announce that he will soon be visiting Bosnia and Herzegovina, where he will participate in the Bosnia Pyramid 2026 Summer Solstice Conference and Tour, held at the Pyramid Complex in Visoko. This multi-day international gathering brings together speakers from around the world. The event will take place from June 14 to June 24. And now, without further ado, let's begin our podcast with the controversial topic of human evolution, or as Cremo proposes, human devolution. Michael, welcome. It's a real pleasure to have you here once again.
It's a pleasure for me as well.
As I mentioned in my introduction, we recorded our first podcast, I think, one and a half year ago, and we discussed your best-selling book, Forbidden Archaeology. So in today's conversation, which is kind of continuation, we will explore the key ideas from your other book, which is also revolutionary, controversial, legendary. It's called Human Devolution. Ljudska devolucija. Imam hrvatski primjerak. This is Croatian edition, but unfortunately we don't have it any longer. But you can buy this book on English on Michael's website. I will put a link in a comment below. So what I would like to do today is to go through the chapters of this fantastic book with you, so you can give us a brief summary or kind of a commentary on each chapter, so we can really go into the depths of what you are proposing here. And so let's start with the first chapter. The first chapter is called Apes Who Ascended or Fallen Angels. Very, very good. So would you say that this first chapter sets a scene, stage for your main thesis that humans are the humans the result of evolution from the lower species, or the kind of descent from the higher states of consciousness?
Yes, I'm approaching this question from a Western perspective, because that's where this concept arose. Charles Darwin published his book, The Origin of Species, in 1859 in England, and its influence spread all over Europe and from there to the world. And putting the question in the terms in which it was understood in the mid-19th century, I decided the chapter title, Fallen angels or evolved apes is the question, because that's how it was discussed at that time. And many people, they recognize the challenge to some of the religious doctrines of the time of this theory of evolution, which contradicted the idea that humans like us were simply accidental creatures in an accidental universe that just happened to have evolved somehow or other. So actually, the British Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli, discussed it in those terms. When he first heard the theory, he said, the question is, are we apes or angels? And he said, I am firmly on the side of the angels. Of course, he was laughed at and ridiculed, but that was his idea. So I thought it was good to frame it in those terms. Of course, I'm inspired a lot by Vedic philosophy, which has its own concept of evolution, somewhat different from Darwin's. So, but I wanted to introduce this in a Western context.
Okay, so what do you say? Let's go to chapter 2, Forbidden Archaeology, the Hidden History of Human Race, like your first book. So what are the most compelling pieces of evidence that challenge the mainstream timeline of human origins?
What I found most astonishing was that there's not one or two strong cases. There are literally hundreds of them in the scientific literature. They don't make their way into the textbooks, but they are there in the professional scientific literature. And the list of discoveries goes back to the 19th century all the way to the present. One of the earlier discoveries that I found really fascinating was the California gold mine discoveries, which were reported to the scientific world by Dr. J.D. Whitney, who was the chief government geologist of California. His report was published by Harvard University in the year 1880. It told of skeletons, human skeletal remains, human artifacts being found deep in the strata of mines in the gold mining region in California. And according to modern geologists, the age in which these objects were found, the age of the sediments in which these objects were found, is about 50 million years.
Wow.
Which is really quite astonishing. Now, in more recent times, such discoveries continue to be made. Maybe not as old as that, but they certainly contradict the theories of human evolution, which have humans like us first appearing less than 300,000 years ago. For example, in 1979, Mary Leakey, a very prominent archaeologist, discovered human footprints at a place called Laetoli in the country of Tanzania in East Africa. The footprints were found in solidified volcanic ash, about 3,700,000 years old. So that is many times longer than modern science today accepts for a human presence on this planet. So what I found astonishing was not that just one or two discoveries like this, but enough to fill up a 900-page book, because that's what forbidden archaeology was. So, and the reason that that's significant is in this latest book, Human Devolution, I'm offering a Vedic alternative to Darwin's theory. And why offer an alternative unless there's some problems with the current version? And I think they are. And it's not confined just to fossil evidence, other factors are also involved, like genetics.
Mhm. Yeah, writing this down. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the chapter 3, the extraordinary antiquity of non-human species. So, what evidence are you proposing in this chapter?
Well, this is very interesting. Once I was giving a lecture on forbidden archaeology, and I also mentioned human devolution at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. And the lecture was organized by a prominent historian of science, a professor at the university. And many people came from the faculty and from among the students. And among the faculty members who came was an evolutionary biologist. And I gave a presentation about forbidden archaeology, the archaeological evidence for extreme human antiquity. And this evolutionist professor, who had brought many of his students with him so they could see him defeat me, so he he said during the question session, he was the first one with his hand up. So the organizer of the meeting recognized him and he stood up and he said, "What you're saying is all very interesting, Mr. Cremo, but what about evidence for the extreme antiquity of species other than the humans? There's no such evidence." And I told him, "I'm glad you asked that question because in recent years in China, paleontologists have discovered the fossils of a large mammal, sort of like a big dog or a wolf, and it was eating baby dinosaurs. You know, they could tell from the contents of its stomach region. So, and he had specifically asked, he said, "Where's the evidence for dogs in the Jurassic period?" And I had an answer for him. Because normally the idea at that time was the only mammals present during the time of the dinosaurs were very small, like a mouse.
Hmm.
So to find this big fossil animal that looked like a wolf with bones of baby dinosaurs in its belly was really amazing. So
Yeah.
yes, there is evidence for other species. I think a book called Forbidden Paleontology could be written.
Okay, moving along, chapter 4, genes, form, and the creator. So, to what extent do you see genetic processes and as guided or influenced by higher intelligence or design?
Well, this is a really interesting question. Each human being is composed of trillions of cells, but each human begins from a single cell, a fertilized egg, and each one divides into two, and then two again and two again. Each one has the exact same DNA in it. So they say that DNA gives the structure of the body, but they don't have any real explanation of how that happens. They just assume that it does happen. They may have a few pieces of the puzzle, but they certainly don't have the complete picture. They would have to say, since each cell has the same DNA in it, how does a cell know that it's going to be a brain cell, a neuron in the brain? How does the cell know that it's going to be a muscle cell? So there has to be something going on that's guiding that process, some higher intelligence that has uh, inform the soul. Maybe it's in the millionth cell division from the beginning, that it's going to be a neuron cell in a brain rather than a cell in your fingernail or something like that.
Mm.
So it's pretty interesting. Also, the uh, genetics has been used to try to identify when a certain species, say the human species, broke off from a previous more ape-like ancestor. And they try to do that, but it's based on a series of assumptions about the rate of mutations in DNA. They try to make a kind of molecular clock, but there's no guarantee that their molecular clock is set right to the right speed. So there are problems when you get into genetics and try to apply it to the origin or age of the human species. All that work is done on mostly, for the most part, uh, DNA in existing populations. And they try to make some inferences about what happened in the distant past. In recent years, they've started to be able to recover some DNA from fossils. They call it ancient DNA, but it only goes back so far in time. And it's possible that many lineages have not contributed their DNA to the current gene pool. In other words, there may have been all kinds of human creatures who existed in the distant past who didn't leave any ancestors. So we're not even aware of what their DNA is.
Yeah, that's a very good perspective. Yeah, so many things to unpack here. Okay, shall we move along? Chapter 5. Very interesting title, Behind Stone and Bone, Alfred Wallace and the World of Spirits.
Well, we've seen if we confine ourselves to a material perspective, a physicalist perspective, the evidence really doesn't add up to evolution, human evolution. There's archaeological evidence that contradicts the evolutionary theory. Genetic evidence really doesn't support it very well. So you've got a lot of problems with it. Therefore, some scientists have explored alternatives that go beyond the materialistic assumptions that science currently operates under. Science is like a game played according to certain rules. One rule that they have is that you can't bring in any non-material substance like consciousness as something apart from matter. Another rule is you can't bring in higher intelligence having any effect on the order and complexity that we observe around us. So those are the rules. Now, if you play by those rules, you may come up with some explanation or you may not come up with it, just like they haven't come to any explanation using that method for the origin of the first single-celled organism, how it self-organized from chemicals. And there are many other questions they haven't answered, like the origin of consciousness. So it's interesting that although it's not very popular today, some scientists, famous scientists of the recent past, have explored alternatives that go beyond the materialistic assumptions of modern science. One of them was Alfred Russel Wallace, who was, along with Darwin, the co-founder of the theory of evolution by natural selection. It used to be called the Darwin-Wallace or the Wallace-Darwin theory, not just the Darwin theory. So we may ask, well, why is his name not there anymore?
Yes.
It's because he became interested in what's called the paranormal, the idea that there is some higher intelligence that's influencing the course of events on our level of reality. He came to accept the existence of subtle energies of consciousness as something that doesn't come from combinations of material elements or molecules. So, because of that, Darwin said, I really can't go along with this, Alfred. Uh, it's like you're murdering our child, the theory of evolution, by bringing in all of these things. So gradually he got marginalized within the scientific community. But it's interesting, in more recent times, the past 20 or 30 years, many scientists are now becoming interested in consciousness as something that exists apart from matter.
Yeah, that leads us to chapter 6, very important one. What is the human being? Matter, mind, or consciousness? So how would you define the human being as something beyond material body? And what role does a consciousness play in that definition?
Well, it's a great question, Ines. It's today, most scientists would say we're machines made of matter, and that's all there is to it. And as far as consciousness is concerned, that's just a temporary byproduct of bioelectrical activity in the brain. When at the time of death, the chemical interactions in the brain gradually cease, then there's no more consciousness. It's just like, if you drink, some carbonated water or a soda pop, maybe when you pour it into the glass, there's some bubbles, but they fade away quickly, no more bubbles. So they think consciousness is like that. It's produced from matter. We evolve up from matter as conscious beings. And consciousness is important because it's the most real fact of our existence. It doesn't require belief. Everybody experiences it. I have my consciousness, you have your consciousness. Each of our listeners or viewers has their consciousness. Without that, we wouldn't be having an experience like this. So there are scientists today who accept that. Now, there's also sometimes people, they conflate or they make a false equivalence between mind and consciousness. We have something called mind. We have another element that's part of our being is the conscious self, the individual personal conscious self. So just like I say about mind is something you can't see, but we know we have different mental states. Say, today I'm happy. Today I'm feeling depressed. Today I'm frustrated. Today I'm satisfied. My mind is agitated. My mind is serene. So just like we say, my body is in a certain state, my body is doing this or that. Also, we observe our mind, our mental states. And some scientists have really gotten into studying these mental states. And sometimes they can do pretty amazing things like remote vision or telekinesis, mind over matter. So I would say if we look at all the evidence, both individually from a subjective perspective and also objectively through a more scientific perspective, we will find that it's more reasonable to say that a human being is not just a machine made of molecules. There is a conscious self, there's a subtle mental energy that covers it, and then beyond that, there's a gross physical body made of the chemical elements.
I agree. Cosmic hierarchy, an intercultural study. So, what does the concept of cosmic hierarchy reveal about our place in the universe across different traditions?
Well, this idea that we're beings on this level of reality that are a combination of matter, mind, and consciousness leads to the idea that we live in a cosmos that is divided into regions of consciousness, I would say pure consciousness or spirit, if you like that word.
Mm.
And then there's a more subtle realm of subtle mental and intellectual and egoistical energies. And beyond that, there is a level of reality dominated by the gross material elements, and that's where we find ourselves now. So at each level, there's a population that is adapted to the conditions there. So that means we on this planet are not the only intelligent beings in the cosmos. There are many intelligent beings scattered throughout these different levels. I've just given the basic divisions: spirit, mind, and matter. So each of those levels can be divided into different subdivisions, but just to keep it simple, I'll stick with mind, matter, and consciousness. So the beings on the level of ordinary matter have a covering of gross physical elements and subtle mental elements. On the next level, the beings don't have gross physical bodies of our type. They have bodies composed mainly of mind, by which I mean different mental energies, intellectual energies, egoistical energies. And people in different cultures have different names for these beings. They call them devas, angels, jinn, demigods, demigoddesses, and so on. They appear in the teachings of different wisdom traditions of various ancient cultures. And beyond that is a level of pure consciousness, which we could call Krishna consciousness or God consciousness or something of that sort, beyond matter, beyond mind. So this can be found in many different cultures, practically every culture that's existed in every time and every place that we're aware of on this planet. So that is where we get the idea that we're part of a whole cosmic population of beings on these different levels.
Yes, there are very, I think I will put, I will say Dario to put in a podcast this Vedic structure of universe. It's very well presented, so viewers can have some idea how the Vedic universe looks like. Okay, so chapter 8, apparitions, angels, and extraterrestrials. So how should we understand phenomena like these within your overall framework?
Well, they give support to the concept of a cosmic hierarchy of beings existing on different levels of reality. Now, for some people, they're going to say, well, that's just mythology. It's just something these ancient people imagined and maybe wrote a few words about, but there's no reality to it. Now, opposing that is the modern evidence for beings from higher levels of reality. And this takes you into the whole modern UFO alien type of extraterrestrial beings that are reported by many people, including very professional scientists, military pilots, other people who have a lot of contact with the sky. So practically every country in the world has some division of its government that's studying these things. The American government does. And there are many people who report, many credible people who report such things. There are also people, including scientists, who report being in contact with entities, with beings that are beyond this world. For example, a departed loved one, sometimes through different agencies, maybe a medium, such people will report being in contact with that relative, and the communications that come from that personality would only be known to that person and the person who is in contact with him or her, with that spirit. And then there are reports of Marian apparitions, for example, in Christianity, particularly Catholicism. There's the concept of the Virgin Mary. And there are many well-attested cases of people reporting encountering or getting a vision of the Marian apparition, the manifestation on this level of reality of a person associated with a sacred place like Lourdes, for example, in France, and other places as well. So if one has a proper perspective, if one is aware of all the evidence that's available to us, there is evidence that's consistent with the idea that we're part of a whole cosmic hierarchy of beings. And how this fits into the concept of human devolution is the idea that we are the spirit souls, and we begin on the level of pure consciousness. And on that level of pure consciousness, the ruling principle is harmonious, loving cooperation among all beings of pure consciousness and the source of all conscious beings. So when that loving harmony is disturbed by the slightest bit of selfishness, a desire to control and exploit and dominate, such a conscious self can no longer remain on that higher level of reality or be qualified to enter it if one wants to assume one never was there. So this is important. Then there must be some other place for it to act out its desires, which aren't suitable for that higher level of reality. And that's where we are. In other words, we don't evolve up from matter, we devolve or come down from spirit. Some descend to the level of the mental energies, and they exist there as gods, angels, jinn, uh, devas. And then some go further down and receive an additional covering. In addition to the mind covering, they get a physical body covering them. And that is devolution. And the purpose of life is revolution, re-evolution, bringing the conscious self to the state where it's free from its contact with matter and mind.
Thank you. That was very, very insightful, very deep. Chapter 9, paranormal modification and the production of biological forms. So are you suggesting that biological forms can be influenced or shaped by non-physical paranormal factors?
Not only influenced, but as you said, shaped.
Shaped.
Where, in other words, now we find ourselves as conscious beings inhabiting or being placed in gross physical bodies, which are like a vehicle for the soul, like a car is a vehicle for the driver and the passengers. So our conscious self is like that. So then we have to ask, where did these vehicles come from? And it's like any other vehicle, it was manufactured for a purpose. So the beings that manufacture the different types of bodily vehicles made of matter that we inhabit are higher beings, higher than us in the cosmic hierarchy. They're called, in Sanskrit anyways, Prajapatis. They are the makers of these vehicles. So now somebody might say, well, where's the evidence for that? And that is where scientifically reported evidence for the ability of consciousness to affect the forms of our material bodily vehicles comes in. And there's a body of evidence for that, for the ability of mind to influence, not only influence, but shape or construct gross physical bodily forms. I mean, just to give a crude example, now we have computer 3D printing, where you can make a digital model of something. In other words, a mental model that you can run through a printer and it'll produce a gross physical representation of it. So our bodies were originally constructed like that. Of course, once the body types are originally produced, they go on to reproduce themselves, which is something. But the body made of material elements is limited. It's of limited duration. It comes into existence at a certain point. It goes out of existence at a certain point. Generally a species will have an average lifetime. So that is a limitation of consciousness. We feel it. That's why we're uncomfortable with the idea
Yes.
of of that. So some interesting questions arise, like why do we get a particular type of material bodily vehicle?
Mhm.
Uh, that has something to do with the mental state at the time one departs the previous bodily vehicle. It is the mental state that determines what the next physical embodiment will be. So, kind of solves a question that Darwin had a lot of trouble with. He couldn't explain the mechanism of why one body turns into another. Uh, that was his big mistake because he didn't know about either the subtle mental body, although he had an opportunity. His partner in making the theory of evolution, Alfred Russel Wallace, understood it and tried to introduce it to him, but he didn't do it. And because of that, he was never able to really come up with a satisfactory mechanism for evolution. Uh, what's really evolving is a subtle mental body, because the subtle mental body stays with the conscious self as long as it remains in the physical material world. Say, I may have existed in millions of different kinds of bodies, bodily vehicles, in my stay in the world of matter. And through all those changes, I've had the same mental body, which is modified at each embodiment. The mental state will go up or down or remain the same. And then I'll get a body that will accommodate that. So Darwin had a good intuition that something is gradually changing, but he couldn't see it for what it really was. It's the mental body that's changing constantly and determining the form of the gross physical bodies.
Yeah, it brings us
So,
to next vehicle. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So chapter 10, a universe designed for life. So what are the strongest arguments that this universe is intentionally, intelligently structured to support life?
Well, there are many physical constants and ratios of forces in nature that are very finely tuned. If they were even slightly different, we wouldn't have a universe suitable for life to exist. For example, there's the ratio of the mass of the proton to the mass of the electron. Proton is a subatomic particle in the nucleus of an atom. Uh, it it has a certain mass, and electrons kind of rotate in certain shells, certain regions around the nucleus, and they have a very tiny mass, if any at all. If the ratio of the mass of the electron to the proton were even slightly different, even a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a bit of difference, we wouldn't have stable atoms. We wouldn't have stars. There, you wouldn't have life on this level of reality. So there are many of those. There are hundreds of values that are set to very precise uh, amounts. And if any of them were slightly different, we wouldn't have a universe suitable for life. So how did that happen? Is it that we just happened to win the lottery, that maybe there have been millions of universes created, just like there are millions and millions of lottery tickets. And we just happened to get the right one, and therefore it looks designed. You know, now there may be millions of universes. According to the Vedic cosmology, there are millions of universes. They emerge from the body of Mahavishnu, who is a form of Krishna, a form of God, who lies on the causal ocean, sleeping and dreaming. As a matter of fact, this reality of ours could be characterized as a dream of Mahavishnu. But in any case, uh, in each of those universes, there is life, according to the Vedic cosmology. So, yes, there are millions of universes, but the values for all these constants are the same in all of them. At least that's what they would find if they could actually go to another universe, which they haven't been able to do yet, although many scientists now accept the idea of many worlds, many universes, multiverse, things of that sort. So that is the evidence for the fine tuning of everything in this universe so that it's suitable for life to exist.
Yes. Wow. The geniosity of it. Okay, so everything leads us to the chapter 11. It's a crown chapter, Human Devolution, a Vedic account. So can you explain the concept of human devolution from Vedic perspective and how it fundamentally differs from Darwinian evolution?
The Darwinian theory of evolution assumes a strictly matter-based concept of the universe, whereas the essential difference of the Vedic cosmology and its proposal about human origins is that it involves accepting a consciousness-based picture of the universe. So the main difference is the matter-based versus the consciousness-based picture of the universe. So if we think and the two views have different effects because our ideas about those things, they help shape our values, our goals in life, our perspective on life, our purposes. So if one has a matter-based conception of the universe and a matter-based conception of who we are, then our goals, objectives, and purposes in life become extremely materialistic. We think that to produce and consume more and more material things in competition with others, individually and collectively, to do the same thing, trying to dominate, control, and exploit the resources of nature, then we get a kind of civilization, a kind of world of the type that we see around us today, where those kinds of values are very prominent. If we had a different conception of our origins, a different conception of the universe, a consciousness-based one, well, there would be some effects on that, of that. There would be some effects of that. And the first would be that we would recognize we're all part of one family. All beings of pure consciousness belong to the same family. And it's not necessary to divide ourselves into different competing groups, sometimes violently competing groups, based on superficial characteristics of the gross material body, like race, nationality, even religion or gender or class, we would recognize we're all part of the same spiritual family. And that would reduce violence on all levels of human society. And furthermore, we wouldn't be trying to dominate, control, and exploit the material elements and resources in an unsustainable way. The current method, which is this matter-based idea of production and consumption, is poisoning the earth, poisoning the air, poisoning the water. We're misusing the resources of this planet. We would try, in a consciousness-based society, try to solve our material needs, supply our material needs in the most simple, natural, efficient, and fair way possible, and put most of our energy into developing the resource of consciousness. So there are consequences for how we approach these big questions. What is this universe? Who am I? What is my place in it? I would say the universe that we exist in has two purposes. First purpose is to allow us to act out our fantasy of being able to enjoy ourselves apart from our contact with our real nature of pure consciousness and our relationship with the source of all conscious beings. That's one purpose. The other purpose is we're being given every opportunity to understand our nature as beings of pure consciousness, part of the supreme conscious being, just like sparks are part of the fire. They're the same substance, but difference in size. There's a relationship between the spark and the fire. So the purpose of human life is to understand our fiery nature as spirit, as beings of pure consciousness, and at the same time recognize that we're not the ultimate being of pure consciousness. We have a relationship we're part of, but not the whole thing.
Yes, that's a very important point because it's very modern to think that we are God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Well, we
yeah.
are in one sense.
In one sense.
In one sense, we are, because if we weren't alike, if we weren't one on some level, there'd be no possibility of relationship. If we were totally separate by nature, there'd be no interaction. Like, if we're traveling, we may, you recognize, somebody from your country or your city. There's some relationship, begin to talk. Somebody who's a complete stranger, nothing about, have nothing in common with, very difficult to have a relationship. So, but at the same time, there's oneness, there's simultaneously difference, because without difference, it's not possible to have a relationship either. If everything's all one, there's no relationship. So, simultaneous oneness and difference.
Yes. Okay, I think we covered now all the chapters, but before I ask you for the closing words, let me again say that, as I said also in introduction, that you will be soon coming to Bosnia and Herzegovina to be part of this Visoko event. So it's called Bosnia Pyramid Summer Solstice Conference, which is going to be held in June. What will you be presenting there, and how does this location connect with the ideas of your work?
I'll be speaking about many of the topics that we covered this evening. I'll be talking about forbidden archaeology and what the significance of it is. Because some people might say, okay, you've got all this fossil evidence, all these stones and bones showing that human beings have been around for a long, long time. But what difference does it make? Well, it does make a difference, and I'm going to be going over that. It means we need new explanations for human origins. So I'll be presenting some ideas about that. And I'll also be talking about the effects that these choices we make about deciding who I am, what is this universe, have a big influence on the quality and character of our lives. So I'm really looking forward to that. I've been meaning to come to that event for a long time, but this year I'm finally able to do it. And it would be really nice to meet some of you there if you're able to come.
Mhm. I think this event is going to be so great. So it's like a multi day international gathering. Brings together different speakers from all around the world. Michael Tellinger, I think. It's from June 14 to June 24th. So if you're here, if you're interested, please check out. I will put also in a pinned comment the link where you can check all the details of the speakers and events, how they're going to unfold. It's going to be massive, wonderful event, and also it's a solstice, so it's much more eventful. Okay, so I hope to see you there. I'm still not sure if I will able to come, but I'll give my best. So, but before you go, I would like to ask you maybe for some concluding words. And also, yeah, let me say this for those who like to explore more and who would like to buy a book from Michael, you can find it on his website. I will put link in a pinned comment. So, closing remarks, what final thoughts would you like to leave us with our viewers today?
Well, yes, I would like to leave the viewers with a thought. And that thought is we're ultimately beings of pure consciousness. I think this is the most important thing to understand. It's the biggest part of the Vedic practices and philosophy, because it's not just philosophy in terms of thinking, but it's applied philosophy meant to influence how we live our lives. So if we can understand that each of us is a being of pure consciousness and that we're all related on that platform, if that idea became more common in the world, we would see a different type of world than the one we see around us now.
Yes. Michael, thank you so much for this conversation. It was really my pleasure. It was really deep and thought-provoking. One can only like experience it in full if one reads a book. I'm one of the rare who has it on Croatian, and it's really wow. You can read it all of your life. So I hope to see you in Bosnia in Visoko, and I'll give you my best wishes and to keep up your wonderful, wonderful mission. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes, and thank you again for having me on your podcast. It was really an intriguing, interesting conversation. got questions that I sometimes normally don't get. So that's really great.
Thank you so
I
much.
hope everybody who listened or watched got some enjoyment or some inspiration from it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Thank you once again, and thank you, my dear viewers, for tuning with us in this episode. Until next time, I send you a lot of greetings.